once again, good afternoon, everybody. Good afternoon to the students in the class, and once again to everybody who will eventually watch this video on YouTube on the LSLP in Session webinar series. We welcome you to another Demo Wednesday, and in real context again. Demo Wednesday is a space where we bring teachers and practitioners, bring teacher educators to come and share with us some insights about different topics and how those topics apply into everyday teaching and into our practice. Today's session it's part of one thing that we have in the Methods and Approaches course that we call ongoing issues. You may have had the chance to watch a previous video that was about cultural issues in language teaching, and this session has to do with that. But this one, the main topic is framing language learning and teaching from a social justice perspective. And when we talk about social justice, we can talk about multiple areas. We can bring up multiple issues. We could talk about race. We could talk about socioeconomic status. We could talk about language itself. But the topic we want to cover today, because I think it's a topic that continues to gain a lot of traction in the conversations, has to do with two areas that are, although they're separate, they still collide in many elements that have to do with gender and sexual orientation. So I invited two incredible, brilliant teachers and young scholars who have begun to move in that direction and ingrain their work in those conversations, in Eliana D and Diego Zapata-Pescador, two teachers who recently finished their master's degree, and who have moved into this, into thinking about these questions about social justice from the gender/sexual orientation perspective, from their unique vantage points, which they will share with us in a little bit, and what it means to see that from the multiple perspectives of being a teacher, but at the same time also becoming an advocate for the students that come to your class. So after that brief introduction, I will leave with you. I would leave Diego and Eliana for you to. I'm going to 1 second. I'm spotlighting Diego and Eliana, so that both of them can be right here and right now. As always, for the rest of the students, you're welcome to remember, we're going to raise your hand and ask a question and engage in conversation, or simply type your questions in the chat. After this quick presentation that I haven't said much about the two of you, because I want you to also include the introductions as part of your presentation. Eliana, Diego, we're all yours. The floor is yours, and welcome. And thank you again for joining us this afternoon.
Thanks to you for your invitation. Thank you. It's a pleasure to have the opportunity to talk about what we have been studying for 2 years, and that I think it's going to be like the path we want to walk for many more years and make a good work. So what the conclusions that we have found, that we have analyzed after our work, can have an impact in many schools and in many societies.
So good afternoon, everyone. First of all, thank you, Raul, for the invitation. It's always like a pleasure to share what we have done and what we have explored. More than that, because this is also like a journey for the both of us, and all the time we find like very interesting things that we have found in our journey doing this research and talking about this topic, and obviously talking about our own experiences as teachers in high school. So thank you for the invitation, and thank you everyone for being here.
So we leave you the space if you have questions. And
I think that it would be nice, like, to start with Natalia's comment or the situation about the pronouns that Raul was mentioning that at the beginning, before everyone connected. So I don't know, Ellie, do you want to start with that?
Well, that fact of the pronouns have been like something that I have to get used to, because that was not part of my everyday, that was not part of my language. But when I start understanding about that there are people that really have fights with that part of our interactions, I understood that it is important to stay there, to leave there that clarification, so other people can talk to us with some kind of freedom, right? And having into account that we are talking, and that we deserve respect, and that everyone deserves respect. So taking that in, like the base of that clarifications, is very important. It's not just because we have to say, or because we want to say I'm a girl and I'm cisgender and who you are. No, it's a part of self-introduction, self-introducing ourselves to others, and leave them a door of entrance with respect to our lives.
Well, probably to contextualize, like probably the people who connected after, it was because Natalia was one of the first students who came into the meeting, and she changed her pronouncing in the name as Raul, Eliana, and I had it. So as probably Natalia was mentioning at the beginning of the session, it's something that it's very usual to see right now in social media, in social networks, people putting the pronouns next to your name in social networks. But what I consider is important is to understand why are we doing this, and for my own situation or for my own experience, it happened to me that even though as an English teacher we make a lot of emphasis in how to use the pronouns, and always making emphasis that he, him, and his is for male, and she, her, and hers is for women. That was something that I never thought about that before. That was something that we was just part of the language class, was something that we knew how it worked. And since we learned English as a second language, it's something that you have there in your mind, very connected. But uh, the experience was like my first class with Raul in the master's program. And in his introduction, he has the pronouns next to his name, and it really called my attention because it was something that I didn't see before as something important to do, as something important to show, as something important to to talk in a class, and for a teacher. And even though I identify myself as a gay person, I am also cisgender. So I never saw what was the importance of doing that when I was in a presentation, or was in my class, or when I was talking to an audience, like the importance of showing myself as I wanted to be represented, as I wanted to be shown, as I wanted to be called. And at the same time, because it's an open invitation to everyone to feel free and to feel um, like 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 with the right to be called in the way that they want to be called, right? Because this is something that probably we don't pay attention. We assumed that because the name in the title is for a girl, the name in the title is for a boy, we assume immediately that we can call that person a he, or we can call that person a she. But it goes more than that, because not necessarily the name is connected to that, or the expression of the person itself. So I think that that was the first part of the conversation in relation to pronouns. And probably, as Eliana said, it was something that we also discovered and we learned how to use, because in my personal experience, as I mentioned it before, in the English class, you always connect the ideas of pronouns based on the ideas of feminine and masculine. But when you realize that many people don't use them in the same way, it was a little bit of work for us at the beginning, trying to not use them incorrectly, or using the right pronouns that the person wanted to use. Because in our research, we read a lot of authors that they use different pronouns, right? Or that they didn't use a pronoun. They don't use a pronoun right now. So using that, it was a little bit of work for us, but we understood the necessity and why it was important to do it. So.
Well, we were talking, and I'm thinking, I'm asking, I'm wondering if they know what means to be cisgender, because I learned it when I was doing the research, and those kinds of words, that vocabulary is not common for people. And that's something that as teachers we need to start learning, because it makes part of giving an integral education, right? That in these moments, there are many discussions about gender and about sexual orientation, and there are people who say, yes, I am a man, and I love women, but they doubt when they are asked if they are or not heterosexual, right? And we have seen many videos like that in YouTube, that you ask to someone and you say you are heterosexual, and they start like they
or
start like,
they get offended, like, how dare you call me that? Like,
yes, yes.
No, I think it will be. Let me add something else. I actually shared a reading for the students. There is a link in the chat. It's a Medium post about that. And one of the reasons we do that, and I'm talking about, for example, in academia, why so many professors, I mean, several professors I know, are moving in that direction, is simply the act of normalizing that when you start seeing that in social media, and I think Natalia was pointing out, we see in social media, it's simply part of the movement is normalizing this. And as somebody pointed in an article, for someone like me to do that, it doesn't cost me anything. It's a simple thing. I just put in my signature, and I put it in my signature here. It's in my emails. It's in my Twitter account. And putting that doesn't change my life in the sense that, but it helps normalize voicing the pronouns as a part of a larger movement of inclusivity. So I would say it's worth having the discussion about that particular, the meaning of the term, to start the conversation with the meaning of the term cisgender and transgender and what that means, for example, because that's not very, some people may have heard the term transgender, but not necessarily the opposite term.
That's right.
So Eli, do you want to?
Let me see. I believe, I'm reading what Jose Daniel wrote. I believe being cisgender, is that how you write it? I'm gonna write it.
Raul already made the correction.
All right. Is to feel identified as what you biologically are. For example, I identify as a male, and I am biologically a man. That's right. That's right. To be cisgender is to feel or to identify ourselves and project ourselves to the others in the way we match our biological and the way we self-identify. Yes, that's correct.
I would like to add to the idea, and yes, that's the term and that's the definition. But also like to understand that the possibilities are big, all right? When we think about non-binary people, and when we think about fluent in direction to diversity, it is important to understand that, diversity is so big that we can have like different possibilities in the relation how we identify ourselves, not only in the sexual orientation, but also in the gender expression and the gender identity. That I think that is something important to clarify, because sometimes we confuse what is sexual orientation, which is the attraction that I have by others, right? And in that case, we can talk about gay people, lesbian, bisexual, all right, and about the identification, in this case, being transgender or cisgender, as Jose Daniel explained in the chat, but also the expression, right? How do we want to express ourselves in front of the others? And in that case, for example, we can think about the non-binary, how or fluent, where not necessarily we need to be connected to something masculine or feminine, but that we can say between them without the idea of saying this is masculine or feminine, but using characteristics of both, which is also part of the discussion.
We start talking about vocabulary, right? Because that was the way we also started learning about this vocabulary, because it is important to express ourselves in the right way. And because it is important to give respect to our students and to all the people, right? So what are we trying to take to our classrooms is that justice, is that respect for everyone, the respect that everyone deserves. We have been taught for many years under the heteronormative perspective, right? You are a male or you're a woman and point, right? And there are many things that can happen in a person's life when when that person doesn't receive the knowledge about these. We as teachers sometimes feel like intimidated talking about these topics because we never heard about it. And we know that society is like in a process of transformation. It is in a process of changing the paradigm, and to teach, to think, to live. And when we analyzed our lives and we conclude or got to the conclusions, we found many things that nowadays are completely different, right? When we were kids, we couldn't have access to any information at school about sexual orientation, about gender identity, because that was unthinkable to expect that a teacher talked about those topics in the classroom, right? Nowadays, that is a topic, and students are eager to ask, but when they go to ask to a teacher, they found a wall, and the teacher, oh, no, later, we talked about later, in the break. Yes, there are many strategies that teachers have found to not touch those topics. And that is important, because those kids that we're gonna have in class, that young people, because it's not always children or teenagers, but sometimes some, for example, some of you wants to be university teachers, and you are going to be in front of people that maybe they are trying to find their way. And as teachers, I think that we have academic objectives, but also like social objectives. We want to transform our society by teaching and changing the things that we have recognized that are not correct, right? And if we continue teaching in the classic way we have been taught for so many years, then social justice is not going to be reached by that people that has been marginalized for so many time. So it's a doubt a duty of teachers to think not only in teaching English and making them talking and reading perfectly, but how what I'm teaching my students is transforming their lives. They are learning to be citizens in a culture. They are learning to treat others in the correct way. And if we are in class and we see that someone is teasing other, saying, "Hi, you're a flower," and we like say like, that's normal. What there in that point, I think that teachers need to question what are they doing in a classroom. So it is important for you to take that, or I want you to think about that. What are your goals when you are in a classroom?
I would like to say something in relation to what Eliana is saying. It's that sometimes when people ask others about what is your opinion on this topic, what is your opinion on being gay or being lesbian or being transgender, we can listen like a lot of people saying, no, I accept them. I agree. I think that I accept them. And from the very moment that you say I accept them, you are assuming that you have something to accept, that you are in a position to accept others because you are cisgender or because you are heterosexual, all right? And I think that this is the same position that we have seen in education for so many years. Yes, I accept. So in that moment, you are saying, I got the power to accept. I am in a position to accept because I am cisgender or heterosexual. And when we think about justice, is really to have the possibility to be heard, the possibility to be connected to what I do in the classroom, to the possibility to see myself reflected in the materials and the policies that we have in our schools. So I want to talk specifically about those two aspects, all right? What is the materials that we normally see in the classroom? What are the materials that we see in the English class? And when we were in high school, like 20 years ago, we saw that it was always the same materials, talking about families in a different country, families like in the mother, father, and children living in a beautiful house. And we know that through time and in this moment, a lot of teachers are working in contextualizing the materials that we use. We know that that now we can talk about Colombia and we can talk about Colombian families in Colombian context and trying to make some connection to the realities of the students. But when we think about how that reality is also connected to sexual orientation and gender identity, we see that there are not many examples or many possibilities for students to see themselves reflected in those materials. Normally, when we are going to use something in the class, a video, a text, an audio, a writing activity, normally it's reflecting the reality of a few, of a group of the classroom. Not necessarily it's reflecting the realities of all the people in the classroom. And if that doesn't happen with the materials, at the same time, it's not going to affect or it's not going to make any modification in the policies that we have inside of our schools. In this moment, 2021, it's unbelievable that there are still schools that they have very strict policies about the uniform, when sometimes we have transgender or non-binary people inside of our schools and they have to struggle about wearing a uniform or going to a specific bathroom or wearing some kind of accessories that we have said those are for men or for women. So, and in addition, there are a lot of situations that happen inside of our schools that are reflecting the idea of giving the privilege just to heterosexual and cisgender people. And at the same time, we have to think about the all the other components, because we are not only talking about being gay or being lesbian, because we are more than that, right? And when we think about the intersectionality that we all are, we need to think about ethnic, we need to talk about race, we need to talk about social conditions, we need to talk about education, we need to talk about the family backgrounds, because in our classrooms we have like a lot of different possibilities for our students. So something that we found, for example, in our experience, that was that even though we identify ourselves as gay and lesbian, our experience was completely different, because all of those components that were part of our lives, even being a woman and a man, it was a completely different experience. So I think that that's the moment when we need to think and we need to realize why it's important to talk about these topics in the classroom, because the students need to have that connection with the topics that we're talking in class, with the materials, that they can see really reflected in those materials, and they can see, okay, this is something similar to what is happening to me. And for students who are not part of the community, that they are heterosexual and cisgender, also to understand the needs, also to understand the realities, also to understand why they have to do in order to create safer spaces and probably normalize the visions that we have in relation to gender identity and sexual orientation.
At this point, I remember Paulo Freire's work, and I love that part when he wrote about agency, right? The power that teachers have to change a reality. And we were talking about with Raul, and he was saying that it's not automatically. We cannot think that we're going to go to a classroom and that we're going to start talking about this, and next day everyone is happy with the idea, right? It is a process. And with the agency power that teachers have to raise policies, new policies in their classrooms, that action can expand a new idea that can impact not only that classroom, but the school. And through the school, the community. And through the community, a city, a country, the world.
All right, folks. We do have one question. Natalia has already raised her hand,
All right.
so we're going to give her the chance to talk. And Natalia, go for it.
Okay, so I think it was very important what you mentioned about people feeling like they have the right to accept, like we have the power, and it's not only people, it's like places feel like they have the power to accept, like, oh, we have these bathrooms, or and also schools. And schools, we are always taught that schools will prepare us for real life, but these things are like real life, and schools don't like to talk about these topics. And some of my classmates back in school are now transgender, and I wonder how they felt in that school environment. So that's why I also want to to learn, and I'm really interested in how to make the class environment, like, comfortable for everyone. So it's not like, oh, I accept you. It's not like having the power to accept, but it's like just people being free, people being comfortable, being free. And you were also mentioning like some materials. So I would like if you could recommend us, like materials, I don't know, maybe English textbooks. I don't know. I think that would be really useful.
Well, in that case, I'm going to talk about my working, my everyday working, right? My experience. There are materials that are really straight to the point, and we also have to take care with the ages, right? Remember that we have to lead our students to some objectives, but there are ages where students can get better, it can appropriate with the maturity necessary to cover a topic, right? In my case, I've been in my activities, I've been including in like kind of short stories for sixth graders, where I talk about that kind of relations. I mean, homosexual relations, bisexual relations. But the idea is not spot. Bring the topic to the class and spot it the whole class or the whole unit for a term or for a year, because that is also like that is not
Like
inclusion.
positive, there's like positive discrimination, right?
That's right. So that is not inclusion. So I try to use materials where I can show that that is a reality, but that is not my topic, the center of my class. Remember that we have a hidden curriculum. And through the hidden curriculum, we can teach to normalize things. So in my case, I've been the one who has created that my materials. So we can do it by ourselves. It's not that we can, or that we should expect that somebody else or found it done. We can also do it, right? Because we know the students that we are going to teach and the ages and the topics, right? So we can create that material. And there are many platforms where we can share that material. The thing is that we have to start with that because there is not too much. There are not too much.
Well, in my case, and it's very similar to what Eliana has done. I want to call one of the authors that we worked in our research, and is John Wargo. He says something that is something that I always think about it when I created my materials, and he mentioned something called hacking the heteronormative. Right, hacking the heteronormative. We already have a lot of materials there, and we know a lot of stories, and we know a lot of things that we have used through the years. But what about if we use the same materials and new adaptations from what the students know, but obviously using a queer perspective, trying to incorporate new voices, trying to incorporate new realities. So yes, for example, in the creation of materials, normally when I'm doing, for example, a reading task or a reading exam, I try to incorporate different visions. Let's say, for example, this period, I work with families, and I included a famous family that is a gay couple named Patrick Harris and David Burke. They have twins, and it was not necessary to explain that they were gay. It was not necessary to explain that what were the situation. It was just a description of the family when we have twins and their parents, two men, and in the description they had like a lot of different information about them. And when I talked to students, it was clear that it was a gay couple, and they just trying to see them as the material that they were doing for a reading activity related to families, right? To showing probably a different perspective of a family using a famous family. And also, I think that it's important to take advantage of the representation that we have in media. For example, if we see right now in Netflix or most of the TV shows right now, not necessarily the main character has to be a queer person. It doesn't have to be a gay or lesbian or bisexual or transgender, but they are part of the scenario. They are part of the story itself, with not necessarily being the spotlight of the story. And I think that this is something that we need to start projecting. And probably Eliana was saying before, is not that we're going to transform the complete curriculum, that every single activity or every single topic has to be related to the gay community, to the LGBTQI plus community, but that they are part of the landscape, that as the same main characters that we have, being heterosexual and cisgender, we also have the possibility to have LGBTQI plus voices in the classroom, so that we can really see that we can all exist, that we can all be part of the same community, without giving the privilege to one instead of the other. Because if we say that we are going to transform the complete curriculum, it's like saying that the heterosexual and cisgender people are going to disappear from our perspective, and that's not the idea. The idea is to show how natural and spontaneous is a conversation about this topic, that it becomes very part of the landscape, very part of the scenario, that we use them. And as I was mentioning before, I think that the generation now, it has a lot of possibilities to see these voices in television, in music, YouTubers, like people who are talking about this topic in a very natural way, and for children and for teenagers at school, it has become a little bit very natural to identify what a person can be gay or lesbian or bisexual, because of those representations that we're seeing in media. And at the same time, it's an opportunity for us to use them as part of the materials that we use in the classroom. So I think that when we have the possibility to create our own materials, it's something amazing. But obviously, there are many authors and there are many people working about this topic. I think that in Colombia, we are still in the process of creating more materials, and probably that the books and websites and all of these materials that the government is, I don't know, promoting or suggesting to use, we really see that they don't pay attention to this kind of representation. We know that they are trying to involve more into the Colombian context and trying to contextualize the materials about that, but we really don't see like a lot of representation for the LGBTQI plus community in those materials. So what do we have to do? Trying to create our own materials and adapt those materials in order to create like equity for everyone, like everyone feel connected with the materials that we're using in the classroom.
Yeah, let me just jump in, because I really want to focus on part of the conversation in the comment that Natalia wrote in the chat. And because that's something the three of us have had conversations over the past couple of years. When she says, so it's not about highlighting, it's about normalizing. And I think that that particular element that is not highlighting, but normalizing, it's at the core of these conversations. It's the whole notion that, yeah, the LGBTQIA plus community is here. And what has to stop happening is that they have to tell you we're here. There comes a point that, yeah, we should just acknowledge their presence and make sure that they know that there is a space for them just to be here, and that at some point they need to stop coming out. And I think that's one of the key elements in this conversation, that at some point people shouldn't be coming out. People should just be in from the very beginning. So I don't know if you would like to add something to that particular part of the conversation, Eli and Diego.
Well, thinking about that, I think about my position in front of my students. I'm a person really open, and if you ask me something, I try to answer you the best way, in the honest way I can, right? And sometimes, I mean, it's normal that your students say, like, teacher, you're married to whom? And what is the name of your husband? And I say, no, I'm not married to any man. Lesbian, and my wife's name is Alexandra. And when they see that I'm not like, they normalize it, and they take it as, yeah, anybody else, somebody else that is in love with somebody else, and that's enough. So it's important that our posture, our
Positionality.
our positionality, right? Gives them the possibility to see, to model what should be the correct positionality for them to adopt, right? Or to learn, right? And apply in their everyday life.
I would like to say something about that, and it's because when we did our research, we talked about our own experience. And in my case, for example, although it was a little bit difficult, the confrontation with my family, especially with my father, I was 16 years old, and I'm talking about 2002 when it happened. I consider that during these years, probably families are being growing and understanding and being educated and probably being more familiar with this. Unfortunately, I have to say that it's not the reality for everyone, right? Probably in our case, that was the experience that we have. I have seen some of my students having a good relationship with their families after they came out, but unfortunately, it's not the same situation for everyone. It's not the same situation for all of the students. It's not the same situation for all of the teachers, because this is, as probably Raul was saying before, and this is something that we also talked in our study, coming out is not a one moment experience. It's something that we have to repeat in different moments of our lives. The first time that when I started the university, the first time that I was at work, in the different works where I have been, and being exposed to that situation that Eliana was mentioning before, assuming that a person is heterosexual just because you are a man, so they just start asking questions about your girlfriend, about your wife, just because you are a man. So it's supposed that you are supposed to have a wife or a girlfriend. But it becomes something like that, something that you have to repeat a lot of times in different moments of your life, this experience of coming out. And that coming out also as being aware of the topic, because for us, it was also a coming out experience. The fact that we started to talk about this topic, the fact that we started to learn and to study about the LGBTQI plus community, because before the master, although we identify ourselves as gay and lesbian, that was a topic that we didn't think it was something important to talk about. And start realizing about that, it was also a coming out experience as learners and researchers and being part of a master program, because we have to say that was not the first idea that we had when we started the master program, and we didn't think that it was something important or relevant to talk about. It was just after, and especially at Raul class, that we saw like, okay, this is something that we can talk about. This is something that it is important to talk about. But at the beginning, no, when I entered into the master program, the idea that I put in my subscription was completely different. All right, so yes, probably this is the situation that for many of our students at home, they don't have the support. They don't have the and it's understandable, because probably their families, they haven't had access to education. They haven't had access to learn about this topic. And also because we saw that connection between families and schools. If we don't have the support at a school, if we don't have the education at school, if we don't have the possibility to learn about these topics at school, it's going to be very difficult that's going to transform also the families. We live in a country is still very permeated by religion, by traditions, by perceptions of what is right and correct. And normally those perceptions are related to being heterosexual and cisgender. And if the school is not doing something in order to make those transformations, it's going to be very complicated to continue the transformations in all of the families that we have. We know that probably this is a situation that is changing, but we cannot deny that is a problem that we still need to continue working, because it's not only in Colombia. I think that in many parts of the world, people are talking about this topic, and unfortunately, in comparison with Colombia, there are many countries that are in a worse situation from what we are. So yeah, I think that's the situation with this idea of coming out.
Thank you, Diego and Eli, for that. At this point, again, I would like to see if some of the students have any questions or anything they would like to bring into the topic. I mean, or questions, I mean, that they might be wondering. Remember, you have the option of always using the chat, or as Natalia did a little earlier, just turn on your microphone. But while the students are thinking, I think I it's important, because I mean, when we're talking about these particular issues about social justice, and particularly issues related to gender and sexual orientation. And again, I haven't really gone into a lot of the discussion. We haven't really delved into discussions of gender, but they are connected, and they're connected to this because of some of the issues that sometimes you see female scholars suffering and dealing with. And I've seen some of those firsthand as part of an academic couple, but that's neither here nor there for today. What I wanted to bring up is the question of, okay, what do we do? Because I mean, you are in a position where you are advocates, and you're advocates from the journey that you have walked yourselves. Now, the question is, and I think it's important to really, especially for the young teachers that or the people who might be listening to this webinar later. Okay, if I'm in that position where I'm a cisgender heterosexual teacher, how do I go about this process of starting to see myself as an ally? What does it mean to be an ally? I mean, because we talked a lot about that, the idea of the alliance and the necessity of the alliance. But sometimes, I think sometimes we're afraid to go into direction because we don't know where to, not because we don't want to, but because we don't know where to start. I mean, I know my in particular journey in that direction has involved a lot of conversations with a lot of people over a lot of years. So, but I really want I want you to tell us a little bit more about. So what does it mean to start thinking about this when you're on the other side, when you are a cisgender heterosexual teacher who is deeply concerned about their students?
Well, I think in that case, it is important to go to the first phase, which is respect and the possibility to learn about these issues, right? We cannot teach about what we don't know. And we need to start learning about their realities, to start making see their fights, and to start teaching the way we should be. I mean, the way people should address to LGBTQIA+ community, the way people should react to their expressions, right? So as teachers, for example, we should be the teacher that stop that comment out of place when a gay student make an intervention and the other one to laugh at him, right? And we need to start learning, because this generation really are eager to learn about that. That is an issue for them, and they try to express them in many situations. I want to tell you something that happened to me last week, or not last week, like 2 or 3 weeks ago, 2 or 3 weeks ago. I was writing about civil rights, and I wrote the acronym LGBTQIA+. And they say like, what? And what are the rest of the letters? And I started teaching them about what does it mean each letter and why the plus. and some of them start like, oh yes, we have to respect and we have to take them into account, and we should learn about that. Some others were saying like, oh, so I am pansexual. Oh, so I am bisexual. And they start asking about something that touched their lives. And in that space of the class, I saw the other students that I know are part of the LGBTQI plus community, and they were like, oh my gosh, I mean, I exist. And the others were looking at them and asking them questions with respect, yes, and they felt that they could answer, that they could share their lives, and that makes them not feel, instead of feeling ashamed, they feel proud. So an ally is someone that gives the correct place to everyone. Yes, we all deserve respect. And if we start a class and if we start a relationship based on that principle, then things can grow and society can grow in that aspect. So I think that an ally has to start from the respect principle and the learning about realities.
I want to say, to continue with the conversation that Eliana has started about learning, about understanding what is the meaning of the LGBTQI plus community. We had the experience in our schools when we were creating the focus groups. One of the activities that we did was to talk to the teachers, ask them about what they knew about the LGBTQI plus community, questions about gender identification, about sexual orientation, about gender expression, each one of the letters, what is the meaning of being a transgender, what is the meaning of being cisgender. We asked all of those questions to our teachers in our schools, and we found that most of them, they didn't have any clear idea what is the meaning of that. And even for us, I mean, because we were doing this research and we were reading about the topic, we clarified many things, but probably before that, it was not completely clear. So probably the first step that we need to consider is to learn about this. And in our cases, for example, we created a focus groups inside of our schools with the help of the psychologists of the school. And the idea first was to listen to the students. We invited all of the different LGBTQI plus students in the schools. We listened to them about what were their needs, what were their perceptions about the situations happening in the school, if they felt connected with the different practices in the schools, if they saw something that needed to be addressed in the school. And one of the aspects that they mentioned it was that so many teachers, they use bad words to refer to the LGBTQI plus community, or that they didn't have any idea what was the meaning of that. And they were just replying things that people outside were saying. So as teachers, I think that we have a responsibility to learn about this because we are in contact with human beings. And as an English teachers, we are not just going to be talking about the language itself, but the representation. I mean, as language teachers, we use the language to represent our realities. And if we don't have a clear idea of what is the meaning of LGBTQI plus, how am I going to address and to talk about this topic? So I think that that's the first step, that it's really a responsibility that we have to learn about this topic. Because when we understand that, we are going to see that our materials are going to be different, that the way that we address the situations in the classroom are going to be different. And as teachers, we also have the possibility to create policies in the classroom, but also in the school. So if I am not aware about that situation, I'm going to continue doing the same things that I have done before, like just going with my life. This is not something that is affecting to me. From my position of being cisgender or being heterosexual, this is not something that I really can see. I'm going to continue permeating these situations of power, these situations of inequity, the situations of everything's being heterosexual and cisgender assumption. So I want to point out something that S.J. Miller said in S.J.'s studies, and it's, why do I have to change the things that I'm doing just because one student, right? Because that's the perception that many teachers have. No, but in that classroom I only have one gay student. No, but in that classroom I only have one transgender student. So am I going to change everything just for one student? And I think that the answer is yes, right? I think that the answer is, what am I gonna do in order to create like everyone in the classroom feel connected to what we're doing in the classroom, and also that it also change the perceptions of like that those people have, because that's something that they are going to transmit in their families, and in that way the cycle is going to be different, right? That what we learn in the school really change the ideas that we have in our families. So I will say that in relation to what to do.
All right, so we have one question. Susanna has been patiently waiting with her, raising her hand. So Susanna, you can go for it.
Yay, thank you. So I really find this talk pretty interesting. And what were you saying that we as teachers have to learn? I consider there is like the first step in order to guide our students that may have like a lot of questions. They may be kids and don't understand what's going on with them. But then I have heard like some people that is assigned for being a teacher, like saying, oh, if I had a transgender student, I will, let's say it's a man, but then he feels like a woman, and then he's like in that transition, he will say like, I will still call him a man because, or I refer to him as he or him, exactly like that, and I will not change my mind. So how can we as teachers also handle with that kind of teachers, like to not let our students down, like when they are facing those troubles of, I have people that accepts me, but then also I have people that don't, especially that they're my teachers, that they're supposed to guide me, that having doubts and everything. That will be it.
I want to add something that it's kind of related with what you said, and it is something that I have felt, and because when I started this topic, I said, well, I'm a human being and I also have my limitations, right? And I also have my own thoughts, and I also am crossed by my own beliefs, right? I'm Christian Protestant, and sometimes it was like a fight, because my principles, what I'm reading, what I have to share, right? But there is something that was like my I don't know how to say that, like my support, right? And it is that there is something that any human has to or can lose, which is respect. I can't think. I need to be open to knowledge, because that's knowledge. It doesn't mean that I am going to become like, yes, if you want to be an advocate, if you want to be an ally, amazing, yes. But there is something that we need to accept, and it is that we also have limitations. In those limitations, there are things that we have to manage, and it is that we have our own opinions, and those opinions cannot affect the way we treat others. So when a student felt that he's been disrespected, he needs to learn that he has to ask for that respect, right? And if we can like accompany that student in that process, it would be amazing, because he's gonna learn from the model, and we can lead them to that. We are not taught to demand our rights. We know that we have rights, but when we are disrespected, many people stay in silence. And that's why many social movements lose strength, because no one teaches how to ask for, how to demand our rights, how to demand that we are human beings that deserve to be respected. Some years ago, I went to a pool park, and one of my students was not allowed to get into a pool because she was a girl using boys short and using t-shirt in a pool. And I had to talk with the keeper of the pool, and then they said, like, those are the rules. She has to be with a swimsuit, girl swimsuit. If not, she cannot get into the pool. And it was like, how? But I mean, the fabric is okay. It's like a boy. I mean, a boy. Look at there is a boy, and he's using this same clothing. So why not? And they say, I have to talk with the manager. And I said, okay, I accompany you. And I went with him, and I had to talk to that manager, and I said, that is discrimination. And if you continue with that attitude and my student cannot enjoy the trip, then we're gonna have to write something in the web page, and you're gonna I mean, you have to face the consequences, because this is not acceptable. That was so meaningful for that student. And she said, oh, I didn't know I had the right to do this. And I said, yes, you are. You have that right. And she said, okay, I'm never, this is not gonna happen to me again, ever again. Because now I know that I have rights, and I know that the law supports me, right? So we need to model for them how to ask for the rights, how to demand the rights. And if we can accompany them, that is amazing.
And I mean, based on what Eliana is saying, and Susana, as you asked about teachers, all right, like how do we deal with them? But I would like to say also that it's not only the position of teachers. I mean, at schools, as Eliana was mentioning, we have to face a lot of similar situations, like as she was saying, and this is something that happens probably almost every day when we see situations of inequity, when we see situations with justice is not there, just because of those perceptions of those ideas. And not only with teachers, I mean, principals, coordinators, and very frequently families, all right, we have to deal with those perceptions that they have about the LGBTQI plus community and about a lot of many other topics that are happening in our classrooms. So probably what I want to share here is that at some point it's going to become something political and comfortable, something that probably many people are not going to do it, because it generates I don't know, that you are in a position of putting yourself in the spotlight and saying, yes, I'm going to talk about this topic and I disagree with what is happening, but we have to do it, because otherwise, I mean, as teachers, we we need to create those changes in positions. We need to create this opportunity for people to reflect about this topic. It's not about injecting thoughts and I don't know, like being in Inception, putting ideas inside of your brain. It's more about the reflection that we can have over those topics to teach students and co-workers and principals and coordinators and families to reflect about these topics, that we can really see why it is important about to talk about these topics, what is important to learn about this topic, not only because I think it is right, but also to demonstrate through the evidence that we see. Because what Eliana was saying, I mean, the example that she was giving is something that happened every day in our schools, right? In probably the minimum situation in a fight that we have between students, through the big situations in relation to uniforms and probably schools expulsing students because they don't want to use a specific uniform. I mean, we have like a lot of situations when that can happen, but as teachers, we really need to be in that position of defend or to show that it's a real necessity, not because it's not my reality, not because it's not affecting to me. I'm going to be in a passive position, right? Just because it doesn't affect me. And again, it's going to happen with every situation of discrimination, with any situation of lack of equity that we have in our classroom, right? And again, when we just see what is affecting to me, probably we're not going to be able to understand like all of the different problems that our students have, and all of the people in the same environment have, because since it's not my reality, so I'm gonna be just like not being affected, so I'm not going to do anything about it. So I think that we need to think about all of the different members of the community, all right? Because yeah, it's not only teachers, there are many others that are part of the community.
Amazing. I want to, again, once again, if there are any final questions, because we're almost, time is already starting to wind down. Any questions for any of the students or any comments? This is a good time to hit the chat or open your microphones and express your thoughts.
Hello, I would just want to make clear like the point of us from our perspective as teachers. Like the main issue is to teach about respecting and awareness and dignity from these issues of identity, mainly identity. It's not about the pronouns, it's not about the because the same issue here with the LGBTQIA plus. I hope I said that right, because I knew it like LGBTQ, but it's hard when you add more letters because it's more to memorize. Because the same issue with the community happens with other people, like not only with these aspects of gender and identity, but also with issues for xenophobia. So it is mainly about awareness and teaching dignity. But how can we start doing that with little kids like 5th graders?
Well, I think that we need to change the paradigm of teaching. Like, for example, when we talk about families, nowadays we have homoparental families. My family is homoparental. I have a son. He's 16 years old. Yes, he's old. But when he was young, I also have a female partner in life. And that was a process to teach the teacher. I have to teach to the teacher that she has to intervene when the classmates of my son were mean to him. when talking about his family, right? So I think that that is the first part, to show them that the reality is not father, mother, and children, and that's all, and that's the only objective in life. And yes, we need to open the possibilities and show them that they, I mean, that kind of families already exist. It's not that we are trying to create a new environment for them, right? And normalize it. Yes, as we talked about father, mother, and children, we can also talk about father, father, children, mother, mother, children, right? So it's a starting. I think it starts in that part. When we teach that we human beings have the possibility to love somebody else that maybe it has our same sex.
Well, I would like to add something about, I don't know how many of you are planning to be teachers at public schools or working in high schools. Um, I'm saying this because when I was in the university, I was in my idea about teaching English and how my class was going to be in relation to teaching English. But spoiler alert, probably you're not going to teach English. You also are going to have to teach ethics or Cátedra de la Paz or a lot of different subjects that are not, or even Spanish or even math, because yes, that's something that can happen. So I'm saying this because this is not only about one subject in particular or one signature in particular, but the intersections that we can have about important topics to talk about. And this is a topic that we can address from any area, not only in the ESL class, but also in whatever class you are teaching. And there is a meme that I have seen in the last days, like, teach me about LGBTQI plus without telling me about what is LGBTQI plus. And I think that probably, as we were mentioning before, this idea of playing with the materials to incorporate those new voices, to incorporate those new realities without being explicit about, okay, this is a gay person and a gay person is like this. No, all right, it's also the opportunity for the student to understand that people live different realities, that there is not only one way of being a person, that there is not only one way of being gay, that there is not only one way of being transgender, because the possibilities are infinite. So it's more about opening the reflection through the materials and the voices and the realities that we show in the classroom, that they can be open about, okay, this is something different from what I have seen before. All right, but not necessarily saying that that's the only way, that's the only way that they have to be. And I don't think that there is a specific age, as you were mentioning before, as how am I going to address this topic for fifth graders. I think that even in lower graders, there is also an opportunity to talk about this. One of the studies, for example, by John Wargo, is using story tales like Cinderella and Snow White, and I mean stories that people have known through time, but changing the version. Right, probably it's not Cinderella, but it's a transgender girl going to a ball, for example, or a story that we all have seen in time, but probably moving into a different direction. So there is no, I mean, according to the studies, there is not only like a specific moment or time to start talking about that, because when we use those materials, is going to be always an opportunity to address that topic without being so explicit about what it is. And as soon as they grow up and try to be more critical about what they do in class, it's also like the way that they can see what it means to be LGBTQI plus. And in addition, all of the different topics that you want. You were talking about xenophobia, and in our case, for example, it's something that we see every day in our schools, because the population that we have, for example, from Venezuela, it's very high, during the last years, and we need to consider that, all right? Because sometimes when we think about what is the reality in Colombia, it can be a very different from them. They can also feel part of the class, even although they are in Colombia, they also want to see their families reflected, their realities reflected, their vocabulary reflected, because it's as language teachers, it's a reality that we need to assume. Sometimes we talked about things that are related to Spanish from Colombia, but what about the realities that they have? So yeah, I think that all the time you have the possibility to incorporate those realities in your class.
And now, just to add to, I want to add to Harold's question, because the question is very important. And there are two elements to this, or there are two layers to this. And one is the work we do as teachers. And our work as teachers is basically to care. Part of our work is care for all the students involved. So being aware of these conversations about social justice, and this is social justice in general as the umbrella, where issues of xenophobia or sexism or misogyny or homophobia or all the other kinds, Islamophobia, etc., they're all covered in this fight for social justice. So in the classroom, we have to make sure all the students are welcome and all the students feel that this is a place that is safe and where they feel they belong. And I think that's the main consideration. There is another layer, which is the layer that Diego and Eli are moving towards, in the sense of not just being teachers, but also developing scholarship, in the sense of, okay, what area am I interested in doing research? Am I interested in publishing, in presenting? And you cannot cover all the corners. So the young teachers in the audience who are planning to start, developing different levels of advocacy and scholarship, you need to choose your battles. You need to choose your battlefields, your arenas. Not all of us can cover everything. There are people in this fight for social justice who have devoted their time and the efforts to study and research and publish work related to the LGBTQIA+ community. Just as there are people who have devoted their time and their efforts to look at issues of race, or look at issues of xenophobia, or look at issues of socioeconomic status. It doesn't mean that I'm not aware of the others, but I cannot write about everything. I cannot talk about everything, because that will get really tired really fast. This fight for social justice means that we are working on multiple fronts, and we have multiple people working on multiple fronts. The choice you will have to make, those of you who are teachers, is if I want to also move into advocacy, who am I going to advocate for first? It doesn't mean it doesn't mean I would advocate for the others. It means who am I going to advocate primarily, and then obviously care for the others. And then the rest of us will start coming to cover the other tracks. So some of us advocate for issues of language diversity and language equity. That is an area where some of us say, no, we're going to work really hard on this notion of we're going to ensure that people are not discriminated against on the basis of accent or on the basis of where you learned your English. And that's our battlefield. It doesn't mean we don't collaborate, we don't cooperate with people doing the work with race or people LGBTQIA+. No, we collaborate. We do a lot of collaboration. We do a lot of coalescence. We do a lot of coalition. But as we move into scholarship, we specialize and we move and we direct our efforts into particular areas. So Harold and the others who want to make that, you have to say, okay, what areas are the ones, or what areas, if I start doing some kind of research or writing, do I want to specialize in without losing track of the others? So those are the two tracks that are important to keep in mind. That yes, in your class, you should advocate for all your students, but when you start doing your work, you can advocate for specific groups, knowing that there are other folks out there advocating for the groups you can't advocate or the groups you shouldn't. I mean, you don't have the time to advocate for. We want to advocate for all the students in our work, in our research, but we can't, because then we're going to get really burned out. And being, as I always point out, being critical, you cannot do criticality if you're tired. You cannot think critically if you're hungry. You cannot think critically if you're not sleeping enough. So even in that sense, that's where you have to specialize. So you can have time to sleep, and you can have time to eat, and you can have time for the family, and you can have time to pet your dogs, and you have time to care for your children, because that's also part of the fight. It's also part of the fight is advocating for your students and having time to go to the mall and have lunch, and advocating for better conditions for your students when they go to a swimming pool, but also make sure that it's time for you to go with your partner or your date and have an ice cream. Those two things are not mutually exclusive in the fight. Actually, they complement each other in the fight. If you're not making time to hug the people you love or your pets, and you're fighting, then no, the fight is incomplete. So that thing that's always important to consider in that sense. Being that, I mean, I think the time is winding down. And again, we could go on forever, but I also have to be respectful of the time that Eli and Diego have generously given us this afternoon. So I want to just take a moment to thank you. Thank you so much for the words you shared with the class today, for your work, because I know that your work is making a difference already in your students. Your work is making a difference in your classes. Your students have role models, and role models are important. Role models that, as we keep insisting, normalize the presence of different communities in our classrooms, that normalize the fact that, yes, our lives are just as normal as everybody else's. We do the same thing everybody else does. We go have ice cream. We have to go to parent-teacher conferences. We have to go buy food. We have to deal with grocery shopping. We have to take the kids to the doctor. Stuff like that. So thank you so much for being with us this afternoon and sharing, again, from your life perspective, the journey that it means to start thinking about social justice, in this particular case, in terms of gender and sexual orientation.
Thank you so much, Raul, for the invitation. It's always a pleasure to stay here, and obviously to because this is also an opportunity to say thank you for opening us this opportunity to talk about our study, because you were also the one who put us, like, open our minds in order to start thinking about this and talking about this. So thank you for the opportunity to share our experience and our journey with all of the students here. And I hope that we can continue learning from this experience and from being part of this community. So thank you.
I'm really glad of having been here, because I think that is like my dream. My dream is to have the opportunity to talk to many people and have an impact in their lives. So I insist on the same question. What are your goals when you are in the classroom? Keep that in mind. Thanks a lot.
Oh, so again, with that, I once again, that final question is the question everybody should leave this webinar thinking about. Once again, just as a reminder that this webinar is part of the ongoing LSLP in Session webinar series that we feature in our YouTube channel. We invite you to enjoy this video and watch all the other sessions that we have featuring local and international scholars in literacy and qualitative research, talking about different things related to education, how to improve our classrooms, and how to become better scholars and researchers in our work. So once again, for everyone, thank you very much and have a wonderful afternoon.
Thank you. Have a good day, everyone.
Thank you so much.